I will defund university. In Nigeria, we all know it. Most people that want to just do a master's,
I have a master's.
I have a master's.
Yep. If Nigeria can take the concept of structured pedagogy serious, and structured pedagogy just talks about the combination of ongoing mentoring support, access to instructional support, and then instructional materials. Put it together, that's the best system, according to UNICEF and the World Bank, to support your teachers. I think we'll get it going. Fantastic.
There are some useless courses that universities just do. If the universities were left alone to just really solve for real problems, they will not put some stupid courses.
And that's the reason why I support the idea of trying to connect research with practice and policy as well. Library science is not bad, but at the same time, we have outdated physical libraries.
Then the question is, how do we fix it?
I'm going to try so that people don't end this podcast with an MBA in education.
Thank you very much, guys, for joining us on this conversation today. I have someone that I've always admired and respected his work so far, and I'm able to have him on this conversation today, talking about the great work that he does, because I think he has been able to mix the whole idea of social impact and building an enterprise at a very, very interesting intersection of education and technology, and also bringing in various experiences too. And I feel like for us to be having this conversation today, there's a lot for us to pay attention to and take notes. If you are new to this channel, like, subscribe, share, and just dive into the conversation with an open mind. And I look forward to meeting you at the end of this episode. Thank you guys for joining us. And I move over to the one and only Lanre Shaper.
Thank you very much. So glad to be here.
I mean, I've tried to introduce you to many people, and I often tell people, I say, oh, don't you know Lanre Shaper? They say, oh, I know Lanre Shaper, but people know you for different things, apparently. What I found out in this ecosystem right now, people know you for different things. Say, oh, yes, Lanre Shaper, I know him, Chevening. Someone said, oh, Lanre Shaper, AREAi.
True.
So, and people, but how do you define, how do you, I mean, so you're an embodiment of many things. How do you define yourself and what you do currently?
Interesting. Thank you so much, Elijah, for the invitation. I'm really excited to be on this conversation. I think over time, I have interpreted my calling or my purpose in different light, but using a line that, summarizes everything. So I'll say that I'm an all-round professional with, a balanced expertise in research, in policy, and in practice. Now, when you look at those three things, I will argue any day, any time, that it is the balance of those three things that makes us, development professionals, particularly because I work in the development space. So if someone says they know Lanre Shaper of AREAi, you know me from the angle of the work that I do in terms of advancing, access to education, through practice, through policy. And if you say, Lanre Shaper or the scholar, right, is also what I do around leveraging on, academic or experimental evidence to inform policies, and that's from the research angle, right? And a lot that is also maybe not very much common for people to know is Lanre Shaper, the tech person, right? So I also introduce myself sometimes as an education technology entrepreneur because I founded two entities, right, which is now talking generally about my work. The first one is AREAi, which is very much popular, and the second one is DigiLearns, right? So AREAi is the one that brought me into limelight, and AREAi is an edtech nonprofit, and what we do basically is to design and deploy low-cost edtech tools, programs, and products or resources to support learning and teaching outcomes in rural communities or in disadvantaged settings. That's AREAi on one side. And DigiLearns is a very interesting idea that I got when I left McGill at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And my focus in education has always been about how do we ensure equitable access to education for disadvantaged populations. There's a firm focus on that, and that there's a bit of history behind it as well. For somebody who had come from a low-income background myself and has leveraged on access and privilege, I felt there's a way to give back to the society, and there is no better way to do that than to give access to those one's socioeconomic status or geographical location might limit their opportunities in life. And if you talk about this, you're thinking people in rural communities where there is no internet access, where there is no road network, and those are the kind of people we focus on with AREAi's intervention or programs. So DigiLearns onset of COVID, people were doing different interventions. I think that was when U-Lesson started, interestingly. There's these guys in Lagos called Gradely. There's a lot of ideas that came. And I kept asking myself, who are those solving this educational access problem for the last mile users, the children of the poor, of rural farmers, of teachers who do not have access to internet? And that was when the idea of how do we leverage on the power of SMS and USSD that doesn't require connecting to the internet coming. And I was wanted to DigiLearns. So over time, I have built my work as a leader in the intersection of education and technology, working on those two things, DigiLearns and AREAi. So DigiLearns predominantly currently serve about maybe 1.5 million beneficiaries across Nigeria.
Wow.
Yes, people who dial our code or do a two-way SMS interaction on a basic feature phone that, it doesn't have to be iPhone. A 310 you can learn. I mean, we're working with Malala Fund in your state right now to use that solution. And then back to AREAi, which is the one that is more extensive, and I think as we move on with the conversation, there's some questions that would intersect and allow me to share more about the work that AREAi does. So if you know me as Lanre Shaper, the name Lanre Shaper, I think it's an opportunity to talk about how that name came about.
How did it come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I used to be a student leader while in the university. I went to LAUTECH Ogbomoso, by the way, and I studied biochemistry. And that's because I had A1 in biology and chemistry. And, so I just mixed it together, which is part of the things that informed me working in education, lack of, coaching or mentoring when we started.
Guidance.
Yeah, there wasn't. So I was very good communication-wise. It was one of my, it's still one of my biggest strengths. I would have followed that in the direction of my dreams, leveraging that. But I just knew I had, leadership skills. So on campus, and I was doing a lot of oratory contests as well. I was very popular for debates and, I did jaw war, lots of campus debates and all of that. And when I give my talks, I always end with one line that I did not even know how I came by it, which is shaping the world into a better place to live is a collective responsibility. And we all have equal roles to play to effect that. So
that's very inspiring.
Yeah, but then my name was AREAi Foundation because I was very short and small in the university.
AREAi Foundation.
Yeah, and AREAi Foundation is the smallest biomolecule in the body. When we eat and our body generates ATP, when the body breaks it down, it is to AREAi Foundation. So it is to equate small but mighty. That's what the... So if you know AREAi Foundation in LAUTECH then, and you go to any of my talks, I end with that. So people always wait to the point where I would say, shaping the world. So by the time people began calling me Shaper on campus then. And then when I finished school, I joined the Global Shapers community, which is a very popular... So it was very much in tune to being a global shaper, having that antecedent of being called Shaper while on campus.
Oh, so you were called Shaper before you joined Global Shapers? So I actually thought the name came from Global Shapers.
Not really. I mean, a lot of people used to think, if you know the Global Shapers and you know LanreShaper, you think, okay, he must have been a member of the Global Shapers community. I was, when I was in Ibadan, but, age-wise, I had to leave the community. And that is how LanreShaper was better. It was easier to transition to, I just wanted to have, just as writers will have pen names, I wanted to have a pseudonym that would, denote or connote the work that I do in international development. And that's how, we came by Lanre Shaper, which is very interesting. Because now, they even call my wife Mrs. Shaper, which is very interesting.
I mean, your wife also do. Anyway, I'm sure there are people that call you Mrs. Temi, Mr. Temi.
I mean, anywhere I go, I say, oh, I know you.
Everyone knows. Global Temi's husband.
Exactly, which is very fanciful.
I mean, it's quite interesting. I've met some people that I'm talking to Lanre Shaper, and they're like, who is that? I say Global Temi's husband. I say, oh, I know him. So I think kind of both ways you guys are trading names. I mean, but what made you dedicate yourself to education right now in the African space?
Very fantastic question. I think if you look at how over time development has been shaped, we came from an era where there was a lot of emphasis on achieving universal primary enrollment, right? We wanted to get all children into school. But while in that bubble of the MDGs, prior to 2015, governments were trying their best, to ensure that we get children in school. But it wasn't helping the quality, right? The quality of, you're going to have a lot of them, in school, but what is the quality of learning that is being provided? And the essence of that question of what is the quality of that education? Is because it has implication on all facets of life. When there is reduced or there is poor quality of learning happening within our educational systems, it has effect on societal, environmental, and economic factors within the society. Now, it manifests in different ways: crime, violence. So as someone who, I got into university and I had about 4 scholarships. I got into uni, my undergrad, at the age of 16. And, in very interesting grades, got scholarships. As young as I was, I became the class rep of my class. Tuition fee then was 40,000. I was earning 500,000 in a year as a 16-year-old. I had an uncle then. So I was in cloud 9, right? Enjoying life. I used to wear starch shirt then. Again, it was so interesting. And I think I had a reflection one day while around Lautech campus. I encountered some children. I later knew that there were these Lebanese or Libyan children who were begging on the street. And that was the first time I would have a very close interaction with quote and unquote out of school children, which has now become a very popular term in international development or within the global education agenda, which is children who are not attending school, who are school-aged but not attending school. And that was what sparked my curiosity. I started asking questions because it was unusual for me. I mean, for 16-year-old university, good grades, education has always been something that even for low or middle income parents, it was like a right that was actually actualized for me. So to see children at that age out of school on the street, it was so shocking. And I started reading. Right. And I saw that this was actually a major challenge in our society. And then because I was a scholar, even right from a very young age, I started making the connection of how something happening in the society. That was when, to some extent, 2014, 2015 was when Boko Haram also happened. And to many of us introduced to that subject of violent extremism, it was interesting to read about what can be, what is, begetting this kind of challenge. And it apparently seemed to be boiling down to education. And I felt, okay, I studied biochemistry, but this seems to be a passion that, a subject that as I continue to read about it, I was getting angry, annoyed. I wanted to do something. So I started something, by the way. It's called Learn to Lead Foundation. A lot of people never knew that the origin of AREAi is actually some kangaroo walk of someone who is not competent, who is only just passionate. That is where AREAi started from.
You said AREAi when you were quite young.
I started in 2014. I've forgotten how old I was in 2014.
21?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think 21 or 20. Yeah, in 2014.
Yeah, what gave you the audacity?
I just wanted to do something. I just wanted to change the narrative.
So it was as a result of meditating on the problem.
Yes, I was just reading. And as someone who does all these campus debates and all of that, you are always reading. You're always trying to build knowledge. And I started digging. And the more you realize the extent and the depth of the problem, the more you get angry. But instead of getting overwhelmed, which is the usual emotional response some people have I started reflecting to say, something must be done. And what needs to be done? At first, I was confused. I was doing secondary school outreaches to teach about academic excellence until I encountered some professionals who told me, you are just wasting your time. You have to sit down and devise innovative approaches or methodologies to actually address this problem. And, I was writing my final year thesis or dissertation then. And as I was doing that, I was spending time. And for 6 long months, I was digesting content from UNICEF, UNESCO, reading about different programs online. I would say I did a mini MBA on educational development. And that opened my eyes. It took nothing to easily devise what the vision of AREAi would. And from day one, the vision has been the same.
Which is?
To improve the access and quality of education available to disadvantaged children in rural communities. And that has been what the crystal clear understanding of what our work is, just manifesting in different kind of programs and interventions and initiatives. And that is pretty much how AREAi started.
But how do you, or shall I say, what has been your most, because I think you chose a very challenging.
It is.
I think it's still a challenging space.
Yep.
It's one I'm also passionate about, which is one of the reasons why I'm interested in this conversation.
Okay.
My mom runs a school.
Lovely.
in a rural area of Masaka.
Oh,
So
interesting.
she just started a school there.
Ah.
So I kind of like serve as the director of the school.
Oh,
And
lovely.
we try to bring like the best of educational systems here and set it up there. So at the point, I told her, I said, I think you should, because I could see I was closer to the problem.
Huh.
And I could see how parents are not even willing to invest in it.
Which is a problem we have in Nigeria.
So
Yeah.
I'm now a bit bothered, you know, and I mean, and you don't even need to go as far as Masaka. Like when I drive, even this morning, just driving at Metama, I went to drop someone off.
Yeah.
After I left church, and I saw a mom with her kids, you know, on the road. I see them a lot, even in the night. You see the kids on the road, you
Yes.
know, and obviously I could tell that these children are not going to any school.
Of course.
You know, so it really bothered. So we have a lot of out of school children, and I think from the recent statistics, I even found out
More than 16 million.
what?
Yes. According to the latest mix from UNICEF and World Bank. Yeah, it's not even 10 million again, or 12, or 13. Yeah, 16, right, in Nigeria.
So we have 16 million
Out of school children.
that have
Yes.
been counted
Yes.
because there might be more.
Exactly. And I mean, it's worrisome. It's worrisome, but at the same time, there's a lot of systems change or system thinking approach to addressing this challenge that I've seen either from research or from practice. Education in itself doesn't have to be enrollment into formal education, which is one thing that we need to do. Now, I used to argue that every nation that seeks to educate its citizenry must have a defined national aspiration for education.
Yeah.
Why should our citizens be educated? Is it for social cohesion? Is it for economic prosperity? Is it for community development or for self-actualization? If you are able to define that, it goes into how you define the human capital trajectory of the nation. You have some countries that have put so much effort into vocational and technical education without extensive emphasis on formal education. I mean, you will see in some nations where some of their biggest entrepreneurs are those who are not educated formally, who maybe had just a primary school leaving certificate, but they understand how to build businesses and how to build structures that can translate to human prosperity. And that's important as well, because we have troubleshooted over time on how to address the challenge away from political will that oftentimes might not be there in Nigeria. And I think there's a lot of structures that have been put in place to even facilitate non-formal education, even in Nigeria. Right, there's at state level, you have the state agencies for mass education that are just dedicated to ensuring they can mobilize at the grassroots, let people get foundational skills of literacy and numeracy. There are also one agency that was recently called the National Agency for Almajiri and out-of-school children in Nigeria, which is interesting because it's a specialized mechanism to focus solely to the educational needs and aspirations of those category of children. So I would say generally within the system, there are different efforts and initiatives, but the reason why they may not be translating to tangible results would be because we do not have a defined direction for our educational system. And one thing that is very concerning is that every governmental regime in Nigeria has its own positionality, agenda, policy for education. When the new president, also was sworn in, they released something called renewed agenda for education something. And I have, access to this, this piece of, of policy. Yeah. And it's interesting because there is really not too much of, divergence from what we had during the time of, Muhammadu Buhari. But it has a firm focus strictly on some thematic areas that might not in itself be tangible when you implement them. So it is that holistic understanding of how the system should work, the harmonization of either formal, non-formal, informal, should we focus on ensuring that people even have access to entrepreneurial skills. Because if the agenda is to build economic prosperity, to translate to having productive individuals in the society, then it might not be just a function of formal education, right? It might be that, okay, we want to take people through the system of understanding how to run and build businesses, turn the entire educational system into an MBA system. You understand? And then people know that, okay, what we're doing is that we're producing goods and we're providing services and we're developing products for human consumption. And as a result of that, there is that circulation within the economy. People who are not formally, extensively educated can build businesses and institutions that will serve the economy of the people who are formally educated. And with that, we can maintain an equilibrium that ensure that the society can be very functional. But that's not what we're doing, and it's very worrisome. So that is why for someone like myself, I'm always in that bubble of trying to make a connection between academic evidence, practice in the field, and policy making. That circular, intercession allows you to leverage on what we know that works in the world to build what would work in the world in terms of the educational system. And that's why if we have, and no disrespect to our educational administrators, if we have people who have a right balance of technical competence and understanding of how the system should work, we're going to get results. I mean, look at some of the countries that have done it education-wise. They put people who are grounded in the theory and practice of education in charge, and they are able to deploy. They give them the freedom to be able to make sane decisions that informs the entire system. So this is me trying to just buttress on how do I think systemically we can address the challenge of educational provision in Nigeria.
I mean, you mentioned 6 things, right?
Yeah.
Social cohesion.
Yes.
Self-actualization.
Economic prosperity. Yeah. Human capital development. All of those things are really important, right? They can exist in isolation, or at the same time, they form that entire balance that allows us to say, okay, we have a nation, and that is why we have our nation and we have an educational system, and then there's that interrelationship to ensure that our educational system indeed affects itself on the nation. That's the only way that we can actually have a very strong society. And if you look at the development goals, the sustainable development goals, education stands at the center of all developmental aspirations. Yeah. So you cannot pursue, economic, societal or environmental, development if education is not taken care of. And that's why you see gaps in the society, because education is not going well. So,
but I mean, what has been the most surprising, or should I say the most alarming thing you've seen while doing this, your work? Because I mean, I think from statistics, you've worked with over 1.4 million.
Yes, in children, communities. Yes,
communities. Yeah.
I mean, they're quite a number, but I'll summarize them to maybe 3. Right. The first one is parental involvement and engagement in educational provision itself, right? I think in the days of old, parents are so much involved and very intentional about educating their children. The concept, the erroneous misperception of education is a scam has not been popularized and ingrained into the fiber of the society as it is now, right? But you will not blame people when the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs has been dislodged already, when we are collecting from those who do not have, even to those who have. People will not prioritize because what they are focused on is survival, right? But a good example of a time that emphasized why parents should come back to the front burner of getting children educated is the COVID-19 pandemic. Parents became teachers. To ensure learning continues, parents were empowered. And that really showed. But surprisingly, across almost 10 years of doing this in communities, some of the places where our interventions have failed are places where parents are lackadaisical about getting their children educated. It's really worrisome. That's one. The second thing is the capacity of our teachers, right? I'll say capacities plus the welfare or welfareism of our teachers. We do not only work in communities, we work in schools as well. And you would see that even when you have passionate teachers, the level of motivation that they have is commensurate to their state of well-being or welfare.
That are given.
Exactly. And I mean, my mom is a retired teacher, and I know I can follow well how governmental policies and approach to compensation has really affected her up even upon to the point of retirement. She worked and served in a state where for as long as 2 years, they were paid half salaries. And there are governmental officials who would get their full pay, wardrobe allowance, newspaper allowance, and many allowances as well, right? It's very worrisome. And you will see how very ambitious the government would be in trying to transform education, and see how uninformed and unintentional they are about supporting the welfare and well-being of their teachers. And I will always say, which is a very popular saying, but we have practical, experience of it, that no nation, the quality of a nation's educational system cannot outperform the quality of its teachers. It's really important. So we need to pay attention to them. And surprisingly, we have seen that in the most unassuming ways, teachers are not even regarded. And these are people who are primary custodian of learning and teaching. That needs to change. The third thing, which is also very surprising, is the mental attitude of governmental agencies to providing or to enabling change within these systems. The mental attitude. I will tell you for a fact, 2014 we did not have a major governmental partnership up until last year. And before that, we've had more than, let's say, 15 global partners and sponsors. Before we could have one local partner. They will tell you for a fact, if they listen to this conversation, that you've never come to meet us, so why would you say? But I will tell you for a fact that we have engineered conversations sometimes, and from the first 2 meetings, you will know that readiness is not there. For those who have things to do, I cannot sit down in your office from 12 noon to 6 p.m. No, I cannot. Yes. If you work in a society where they pay per hour, you know what that means. Yes. You understand? So I can just not come, and because I want to see you, because we want to have a partnership that will help the lives of thousands or millions of children. I mean, that was a bombshell for us for many years, until we started, engaging with people I would regard as technocrats who gave us room to be able to engage. And because of that cooperation, we're able to deploy, large-scale innovations and, initiatives that touch the lives of many. So you will see that all of those surprising things also is within that complex system of the factors that makes education work, from parents to teachers to governmental individuals as well. If we do not get it right, we cannot coordinate and deliver. And it's important that why that is shocking is that the work that we are doing, one thing, is not a surprising thing, but they always allude to it, is we are not trying to take over the work of the government. We are trying to complement their effort. And with that, if we are being seen and emphasized in that way, I think it will be very easier for non-governmental organizations or edtech non-profits that operate in this space to seamlessly deploy their innovations and deliver for the public good.
But why do you think parents are not inspired as involved?
My brother, it is evident through what we can see that sometimes meritocracy is not the currency. Right? It is not a function of you being educated and hardworking that translates into self-actualization or prosperity. Right? I mean, it is justifiable.
So basically, are you saying like the return on investment on education is not very clear?
For them. And I mean, you can argue with evidence that indeed, so technically we call it rate of returns. There's actually something called rate of returns.
In education?
In education, yes.
Okay, I'm a businessman. So
I like that. So the rate of returns on education is long-term, right? And that is why you see in some countries that understand the science, there's more investment into higher education than primary and secondary, because higher education, you can get, instant, return or rate of returns from the money you're spending into higher education, right? Now, but that is on a technical angle. For parents, for them, it is because they can do the long suffering, but they also want to, they are saying as well that the government, and mind you, there's a part in the Constitution that says the welfare and the security of the people shall be the primary purpose of the government. The welfare and the security. Now, you can interpret welfarism and security in different domains and dimensions. When you talk about welfare, you're talking about, access to basic social amenities, access to essential services like health, like education. And I mean, if it's the primary purpose of the government and the government in itself is failing to make that provision, there's no way parents will not be laid back to say, those who are even supposed to provide it are not providing it. And that's why in Nigeria, bro, there are a large population of people who are doing homeschooling for their children.
I was about to get into that.
Absolutely.
So currently now, I've seen a rise of homeschooling. I was having late dinner one time with a friend of mine recently, and was telling me how he's homeschooling his children.
I tell you, if I have the option, I'll go the same route.
Really?
Yes, I will. Even away from maybe the Montessori's that we have from, where we have them.
One told me they're doing exploratory learning.
Yes, or experiential learning.
Experiential learning.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is because, this is very interesting. Now, I know why you now say you don't want it to be, academic or technical, but it is important. Experiential learning is having practical lived experiences, right? So there is water pollution in the house. How do I respond to it? In the classroom, they're going to teach you pollution and the types of pollution. But there's no practical examples of how our children can translate that knowledge into application within their vicinity. What experiential learning helps you achieve is that there is practical materials, right? It's like taking a cup, filling it with water in your house, and taking sand and pouring it into it. And telling your kid, what just happened is water pollution. I have water in a piece of cup, and I introduced a foreign material into it, which is unclean. That introduction in itself is pollution. There is no way, except that child doesn't understand pollution, because what comes to mind when he or she hears the word pollution would be, okay, daddy showed me sand going into water, that water is polluted. Yeah. And then maybe as a father as well, I would have used sieve, or there's this thing we use in the lab then.
Alum?
Yes, drop it into here, and then you see how the sand gets to the top. I mean, the water, also teaching the concept of solubility or solvents. I mean, with just that one, you're teaching a lot.
Yeah, I think I remember I studied engineering in school.
Okay.
And we did a lot of calculations. And I observed that every single time when I went on YouTube to go check on a matter, I understood it better.
Because there is a practical explanation.
They will tell me that, see this glass, it fell. That made it fail was gravity.
Exactly, exactly. Knowledge is being retained more. And I think one thing to buttress that point is in education. I'm gonna try so that people don't end this podcast with an MBA in education. Okay. There's something called rote learning or memorization, learning by memorization. Rote learning, yeah. And that's what we are very much used to. And that has been
we just learned 2 times.
Exactly. Just so that you remember. Yeah. We used to call it la crème la pour, and I added la crème la forget.
La forget.
Exactly, because you forget about everything. Yeah. But there's something called a student-centered learning, which is also very close to the experiential learning. Constructing knowledge in the classroom with the student in mind. That helps a lot. But you cannot do all of that if the state of the teachers themselves is not taken care of, or teachers are not devoting themselves to professional development along the line. Now, some teachers who do their NCE, they call it pre-service training, and across their entire 30 plus years of service, do not have access to any in-service professional development opportunity, right? So their subject content knowledge, which is the knowledge about what they teach, gets, it's on point.
Outdated?
It's even on point or even outdated. But their pedagogical content knowledge, which is the ability, how they teach it, exactly, becomes problematic because the world has moved on. And they are still using, you still have some lecturers in some universities, not even primary, who are using the manuals or their notes from 1997. And they will tell you, I have trained some doctors or some from this same manual. Right? But things have moved on away from that. And that's the system that's still practiced in primary and secondary education.
Pluto is no longer a planet.
Exactly.
So, but then, so you've painted a picture for me right now in this conversation around an ecosystem of the government.
Yes.
The parents.
The parents, yes.
And then also the teachers.
Yes.
So obviously, it seems like there is the quality of the teacher.
Yes.
Which is like the inputs.
Yes.
Would also determine the quality of the education.
Absolutely.
And then the parents' partnership with the teachers.
Yes, absolutely. Will also work because the home is the first first front
Yeah,
of developing
of
for a
development.
child. Exactly.
So, but then looking at the teacher aspect, you spoke
Yeah.
about incentives,
Yes.
the asymmetry that exists between the incentives
Yes.
for their services and
The
everything,
welfare and the teaching
welfare and the
quality.
teaching quality, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes when I think about this, I kind of feel overwhelmed. And the reason I feel overwhelmed is because it bothers me that if we don't have quality people,
Who are the people teaching our children?
yes.
I mean, it's a concern.
And then the question is, how do we fix it? Because some governor in Nigeria came up one time and did like a learning program to like scrap those like a test,
Yeah,
and
I
obviously
remember that.
that's going to create unemployment.
Yeah, it didn't settle well.
It didn't
Yeah.
settle well. But what are you finding as the solution to this thing? Do you think edtech fixes it?
Absolutely, it does. And I'm
What
going to
are you
give. I'm
thinking?
going to give example now.
Okay.
If there is anything that professionals do well, is to, ingrain themselves with the concept of upskilling, or even reskilling. Sometimes, right? You get some people who are exceptional in the work they do, but because they want to be better, so that they can produce more. Right, you also have quality outputs. They reskill themselves, and that's the same thing that I think is applicable to the system. We need to develop a system where our teachers are subjected to a continuous professional development regime. Right, and that's why it's a concept in education, CPD, continuous professional development.
Yeah.
It is really important, and we have quite a number of people who are doing one or two things. So when I was in Cambridge, so by the way, I did a master's in Cambridge, and it was focused on how do we leverage on video technologies to improve the knowledge and skills or teaching practices of teachers, right? And one of the things I found out is that in countries like Zambia, right, when you talk about pedagogical practices, which is how you teach things very well, that teachers have imbibed, it is because they have watched videos of someone teaching that subject and they are following the ways that that person have taught that concept. It is the same thing that is very possible, right? We can change this around in two ways. We can do it formally, we can do it informally, right? Formally will be the government in itself creating a system. Let's talk about a state government or the federal government having a central portal online where there is access to, we have it. There's Khan Academy, there's Coursera that even we as professionals have. Why don't we have ones that are devoted or dedicated to teachers? That videos, I did a research that says and implies that videos do work. And some of us can still remember movie. I can remember if there is 100 scenes in Three Idiots, the popular Indian movie, I think I will remember 70. It's my best movie of all time.
Yeah, it's one of my best.
Exactly. That retention is because it's a video. Yeah. Right. So we have seen evidence that substantiates the effectiveness of videos in knowledge retention.
Yeah, audio visuals typically stick.
Exactly. And that's the reason why I think so. If we have learning content that allows teachers to get better at what they do, can we translate them into video content, have a portal where they are hosted, and give access to these teachers? If we're going too far, there are WhatsApp applications that became popular during COVID-19. I was recently in Oyo. We were doing a program in Oyo. And in a classroom filled with about 100 teachers, I asked them, how many of us here use a phone that is not WhatsApp compatible? And there was nobody. The ability, which is where what we do in AREAi now comes to be, is the ability to use zero tech or low-cost mobile technologies to drive learning and teaching outcomes. So we're currently working on a multilingual WhatsApp chatbot for refugee teachers. So we have a program called Fast Track. And Fast Track is an accelerated foundational skills development program for out-of-school children and refugee children in ITP camps across Nigeria. It leverages on something called the Mavis Talking Books and Pen. So it's a pen that when you put it on paper, it talks. Okay. So it leverages on text-to-speech assistive technology. Yeah. So what it now does, it translates the language on the material into your mother tongue. So we are combining that assistive technology with the bilingual model of language instruction, which is two very effective. We are supporting children to learn to read and write in an average of 6 months. Those who do not have the capacity at all. Now we've done this for 4 years, and I told my team one day, I said, we might have perfected the learning component of this we now need to focus on the teaching component of it. There's a methodology to teaching foundational learning, which is literacy and numeracy. So as part of that, what we're doing now is we want to build a multilingual WhatsApp chatbot that allows the teachers to master how do they deliver foundational skills instruction. So where am I going? And where do we want to have this hosted? WhatsApp. It negates the argument, which is even not negating. It just justifies. Internet penetration in Nigeria is not as much as mobile penetration. There's still a lot of communities that are not connected to the internet.
Yes.
But NCC says at least in Nigeria, in every home, there is one mobile phone,
yes.
even if it is a basic feature phone.
Yes.
Can we build technologies around what is readily available and easily accessible? Right? And that is what we're trying to do, with that. And what I'm saying is, as an organization, we know that teachers need to be supported, teachers need to be equipped with the requisite knowledge and skills, and we want to leverage technology, we want to leverage low-cost technologies. Away from that, we also have something we're building called the Global Teaching Passport.
Okay.
So the idea is to have an open source portal where we can crowdsource materials, audio, textual, video, for teachers to be able to access materials that they can use for any kind of subject anywhere in the world, not only in Nigeria. Because sometimes access and the utility of instructional materials or aid can inform. If Nigeria can take the concept of structured pedagogy serious, and structured pedagogy just talks about the combination of ongoing mentoring support, access to instructional support, and then instructional materials. Put it together, that's the best system, according to UNICEF and the World Bank, to support your teachers. I think we'll get it going fantastic. If we equate investment into pre-service training and in-service training, one is very, very much active in Nigeria, which is pre-service. We train our teachers. There are so many colleges of education and NCEs. Yeah. The challenge is the in-service. The in-service needs to, we need to get it right. If we can, have it at the same wavelength, I have no doubt that we will really rebrand the state of teacher professional development in Nigeria, and that will be really helpful.
Let's role play a bit.
Okay, I become minister?
Yes.
I know you were going to go there. I mean, what would I do? Interesting. What would I do? What would I do?
You could do 3 things.
If I could do 3 things, let me do 5 things.
5, okay.
Yes, 5. If I could do 5 things, I'll focus on 5 things, right? So I'll just name them. I'll focus on access, equity, quality, inclusion, and right to education. Let me take it again. Okay. Access, quality, equity, inclusion, and right to education. Right. So let me start with the first one, access. Now, I know that there are a lot of children that by virtue of who they are or where they are, cannot, even if you roll out multiple specialized programs, cannot access education, right? We need to...
Due to what?
Due to geographical location, socioeconomic status, individual realities. Okay. For example, we have nomadic children. Okay. They are who they are. They move continually, right? We need to know how we can tailor, educate them, so educate so many so well with appropriate methodologies. So we need to contextualize the approach to providing access. Develop systems that will work for individual people based on their contextual realities, because no one size fits all. Yeah. That's the idea of the access. Okay. How do we roll out, programs, either technology enabled or traditional, that would contextualize educational access to children wherever they are or whoever they are? That's one. Quality. Now, for quality, the question would be, when when UNESCO started working on the agenda for education for all, it was adopted at, Dakar. It's a very popular conference in education. The idea was, how do we get students or children who can read and write? When they adopted the 2015 SDGs, it was about how do we develop children who can learn to do, learn to be, learn to become, and learn to live together. Now, those 4 pillars of learning, learn to be, learn to do, learn to become, and learning to live together, forms the foundations
for quality.
For quality, right? We need to build, so Minister of Education, we need to build a system that allows our people to learn to become, professionals, right? Learning to be humans as well, who understand empathy, because those are the things that are also important within the society, right? Who understand service or service delivery. Because sometimes we say people have businesses who don't go to formal education, but who are even educated, but don't understand what service delivery is about. So it's really important we pay attention to that. Learning to become. We also need to learn how people can become the best version of themselves. Like I have a system where everybody just want to strive to be the best. Like institutionalizing that kind of culture allow us to get the best out of people. We have the best of citizens. And you have some countries that are like that. Everybody, every household is performing, right, for themselves and for the society. Learning to live together. Talks predominantly about peace and cohesion.
Tolerance.
Right. Yeah, tolerance, interfaith harmony. We are diverse people. Minister of Education in Nigeria, we need to focus on that because most of the fiber of, conflicts that we have comes from that idea of people not understanding how to live together. And if we're able to take care of that, we can and should be good. Now, equity. Now, also speaking to, we are diverse people. Our economic status is different. You cannot deploy the same level of access of quality of education to children of the poor and children of the rich. We need to know how do we serve those who are last mile, right? And that's another way to ensure that we take care of these individuals who, by virtue of where they're living, who they are born to, cannot access education. And it might not necessarily be formal education, right? It might be informal education. It might be, entrepreneurship studies, or short remedial programs and all of those things like that. Inclusion. You will go to some institutions in Nigeria, and as someone who is differently abled and using a wheelbarrow, you will have to find people to carry you. You will go to some supermarkets outside the country, and it's funny that there's a ramp. For example, you go to some places and there is a shopping assistant for people who are blind to pick things around the supermarket. That is for a society an inclusive society who is thinking for everybody in it. We also need to make our educational systems, from structures to personnel, to think inclusively. It's really important. Now, the final one, right to education. Now, this is actually a concept that I believe we need to use behavioral change mechanisms to make popular. Everybody, the government owns everybody that singular responsibility to get them educated. We cannot use the lackadaisical attitude or approach to say, we say education is free, they are not coming. There was a time in a state, so that I'm not promoting what I should not be promoting, in a state where during the day, if you're supposed to be in school as a student and you're not, they come flog you. Yes, they come flog you. And I think I like that. Because, there's an adage in Yoruba that talks about, if you are high to hand, then you becomes devil's tool. And it's very practical in the society. If you see, on our news channels when they are parading criminals, just do the average age of many of those people. And you will know that it's because maybe, they lack access to either, employment, empowerment, or learning that's rendered them somewhat useless in that way. So it's really important to also enforce, quote unquote, enforce education. It's really important because if you do that, then we'll have it balanced. So I think my tenure is done.
Your tenure?
Yeah.
Obviously, I think that's enough to keep you busy in your tenure.
In 4 years,
because I
or
think
6 years.
If not more, really. Because
I tell you.
But I think the question that comes to mind is, you have a lot of people now. To be sincere, anytime I think of our educational system, I get bothered because of the fact that when we compare ourselves with the world, we are not living in isolation.
No.
Right? And the way the world is structured now is that there's more globalization. And it's so easy to transmit ideas. Between nations.
What works.
So we are just in a competition with the global space. Do you see the possibility of Nigeria eventually closing the gap?
That's a very huge question. Well, I see the possibility.
What will it take?
I think it takes political will. To be honest. So I used to bant about this with my wife, usually around how it takes some leader 1 minute with a wand of signature to change something around for life.
True.
And that is why many of us, as we journey through life, through our phases of accomplishment in our, in our chosen field, what we truly desire, right? I know I'm speaking for a lot of people. That's why I'm using we truly desire, is to have that leadership opportunity to make things happen. And then what we are doing is just dedicating ourselves to a rigorous phase of training and development to make it easy for us then to make informed decisions. And I mean, there will be a lot of factors that can inform that, right? Because usually too, it might not take just one leader. It could take a couple of leaders. But when you have the level of experience and exposure that some people do have, and the level of academic training, you will know, and professional exposure and global expertise.
Rich,
it gives you that audacity to make some things happen. And I'll give an example. Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, when he was Minister of Agriculture, introduced a lot of things when it comes to working with farmers that transformed agricultural production in Nigeria till date. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it is not just gay saying, it is not just spiritually inspired. It might be though, right? I mean, it might be. And I'm sure it would, because I mean, it seems like a man of faith that connects to the realm, and it could be divinely inspired. But you see how the political will and the mental agility of one man in position of power
can actually cause a change.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing in Nigeria that can actually make us to catch up. There is nothing that we face as a society today that cannot be tweaked or affected if we have the right people and the right system in place.
I mean, I often say this, and I would really like your perspective on it.
Okay.
I believe, I told someone, I said, if I was minister, if we were role playing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not minister of education, but let's say, well, nothing is
science and technology.
But let's say I was a president. Right?
Okay.
I will defund universities.
Okay.
Carry all that money and I'll put it in primary and secondary education.
I'll do the same.
I feel like a lot of people don't need to go to university.
Well, I think the same. If you ask me, I mean, go to universities, but give the universities to translate knowledge built in primary and secondary education to function and make money for the universities.
Exactly, and I think my standpoint is this: we are subsidizing university education
for
the
primary and secondary. Very true. Very true.
And I think it needs to be reversed. Because right now we're having people. When I went to youth service, I had someone that was asking me to help them write their name.
Who are university graduates? Absolutely. You don't have to go too far. In my organization, we have a development talent program for youth corps members who want to work in international development. So we call it Program and Impact Fellowship. Okay. So we go to NYSC, we say, give us those who have studied education or a social science.
By the way, I think I met one. Very smart people.
Oh, interesting. Yes, that's lovely. People. I mean, we've been doing it for years. We've been doing it for years. And I think we've graduated 3 different cohorts and we retain some of them into the organization. We reject some, actually. And these are ones, when they come, we give them, seemingly aptitude tests. Write an email to me introducing yourself. And you see emails without punctuations, without a subject. I mean, and you think, are you indeed a university graduate? When I started, a PhD, somewhere in the world, one colleague in my class was actually 19 years and has maybe 17 publications. Had 19.
International publications.
Yeah, international publications. I went to a conference in Dubai in 2018, and one of the keynote speaker, Brandon, is a very popular chap on YouTube who supports Manchester City, interestingly. Brandon. And it was there, the eloquence, the confidence, the charisma for then an 11-year-old boy was just out of the world. And you look at all of these things and you compare an 11-year-old boy, I think he's from Britain, and a university graduate, a youth corps member in Nigeria who cannot confidently write an email. Where did we get it wrong? And you see that disparity that you're talking about in how, there's more resources allotted to, higher education, and then a meager amount, going into primary and secondary. And I think, indeed, I do support that notion that if indeed we want to really change the system around, don't give them federal allowance. And it's interesting because we have some institutions that govern higher education in Nigeria that are not even connected to the national budget. money goes directly from the Central Bank of Nigeria to them. Yes. It's interesting. There are some institutions like that in Nigeria, and some of them oversees higher education. There's just free flow of funding. And that's why abroad, many universities, I'll use the UK for example, many universities do not get federal allocation or money from the government at all. I have a friend who works at the University of Oxford. He's in charge of a program. And he's telling me that as a program, not as a university, as a program, there's a year over the last 3 years where they made 12 million pounds. Bro, as a program, not even as the entire university system.
I think I saw, I don't know if it was in Manchester or Oxford that published last year their economic impact report.
And you will be shocked.
And they were talking about over 100 million pounds
being made by university.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it shows you the translation of how knowledge acquired from the basic levels of education has actually emboldened and empowered the higher education to be able to be productive economically. I mean, we have colleges of agriculture or universities of agriculture in Nigeria who cannot produce a maize grain.
That's quite unfortunate.
Very laughable, a university of agriculture. So what are you doing?
I mean, I really, to be sincere, this bothers me because of, I was speaking to a professor. And this professor told me something, and he said which was actually what inspired my thinking. He said, Elijah, I don't think everybody needs to go to university.
Yeah, very true.
And we don't, and it sounded like it was him being proud, or feeling like people are secondary humans.
Yeah.
But I remember when I went for a fellowship in the US, I met this very wealthy guy. His family used to come take us to church and take us biking and all. So he was a very wealthy guy, but he was like 70. His name was Steve. And we're just hanging out. And then he gave me some business books. I have some on my table. And I was just enjoying the guy. So I asked the guy, I said, where did you school? And I found out the guy had not gone to university.
Interesting. And he's extremely rich and impactful.
And smart. And we spoke about various issues across board. He had built a repair shop that had become a franchise. And he has sold it for millions of dollars. And he just exited. So he was just literally in his retirement season. So he now showed me that, all that I knew, all that I've learned, all that I've implemented, he brought out the books he had read. Self-learning, just self-learning. And it now begs the question, right? Because then, I run a media and technology company. And my media and technology company, I read engineering. To be sincere, I'm not applying what I learned. I'll only tell people it's the way I think. You read biochemistry.
Yes, I did.
Right? So now, I think in Nigeria, we all know it.
Yeah.
I think we're just deceiving ourselves.
By saying, go to a university and get a degree.
Then again, it's now social cohesion.
Yeah.
Because when you were speaking about social cohesion, self-actualization, all I was seeing was that really a lot of us actually is out of social cohesion and self-actualization. You just want to say, I have this degree. To be sincere, most people that want to just do a master's,
I have a master's.
I have a master's.
Yep.
And then you come back and hustle.
Yes, and join the queue.
Join the queue that you should have joined earlier, because now you went for a master's.
Yes.
You are now at the back of the queue.
And that explains what I was talking about with the idea of having a national aspiration for education. Why do we educate our citizenry? If we do not answer that question and make it a productive conversation, there is no way we would be able to say this is why people should engage in this. Perhaps we should defund universities and invest more in people taking the basics, foundational, interpersonal, entrepreneurial skills that can form the entirety of their lives, whether they study biochemistry or engineering. How can they create institutions or function within institutions that makes the world a better place to live?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that even gets me thinking is because there are some useless courses that universities just do. I think
I agree.
If the universities were left alone to just really solve for real problems, they will not put some stupid courses.
And that's the reason why also I support the idea of trying to connect research with practice. and policy as well. That's one thing you will see abroad. Universities have a research and development team that they set out. I mean, look at like Oxford University. A full department produced a vaccine during the COVID-19 pandemic. That is how to translate knowledge and academic knowledge or evidence into real-time solutions for the society. And that also comes from the idea of the kind of courses that the universities offer.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if some of the courses we are doing, library science is not bad, but at the same time, we have outdated physical libraries.
Yeah.
We are transitioning to online libraries.
Yes.
Even if it is not library science, even if you call it applied and online library science.
Or knowledge management.
Exactly. Or even knowledge management. Almost all institutions in international development has a knowledge management, team. Yeah. But are we actually educating people to learn knowledge management as a course or as a subject in our universities? So it's really a good conversation.
I think there was this book I came across. I don't know if you've met this guy while in your readings, Vannevar Bush.
No.
Vannevar Bush was the one that, very interesting guy. I think you should check him out. You remind me of him as you're speaking.
Oh, interesting. I'm honored.
He was the founder of the. They actually say that between him and the president, he was the most important American during the World War.
Wow.
Yeah, and the reason they call him the most important American was Roosevelt reached out to him, or should I say the president? I think I'm mixing it up now. Who was the president then? But the president reached out to him, and after the war, and told him that, what do we need to do now
as a nation?
And then he wrote a book. I've forgotten the title now, but the book was making a case for scientific progress and how scientific progress moves a nation across all its facets. So that was actually how they founded the research foundation that the government funds in America. So that's how. So he was the one.
I know about the research foundation.
Yeah. So he was the one that set it up. So Vannevar Bush now came up with reasons why. So I just picked up this material, and I won't lie to you. When I picked up this material, I began to weep. I was sitting on my table and I looked at it. I was like, how is it that some people just sat down and said that we must, because this guy literally discovered, it was through his research that he discovered the penicillin that helped the soldiers while they were at war in Vietnam, because they were all dying of what disease and then they had to take penicillin. I've forgotten the name now. Tetanus, yeah. So a lot of them were having those issues, and then penicillin, and then all of a sudden this guy came and then he wrote a letter back to the president, because the president told him,
can you see
that this is what I am bothered about, right? And then he writes it that what we should focus around is scientific progress, because scientific progress will in fact affect the quality of our living. True. It will even put us as a leader in the talk of nations, because then as a result of scientific progress, we now have better machines to fight wars, which will cause peace in the world, because now nobody wants to come against us, and we don't want to go against anyone. It will bring about great development in terms of quality of living, the manufacturing of the ACs and manufacturing of a car, and he cut across every sector.
Wow.
And when I read that document, Larry, I really came to understand that what you spoke about, national aspiration.
Yes, for education.
And the fact that we really need to sit down and ask ourselves questions. As a matter of fact, I even think we might even need to go as extreme as
scrapping something
and say, in Nigeria, we don't focus on this area.
Yes, to be honest.
We focus on these other ones.
Every other thing, we want to zoom in on. Yeah.
Because I think we need to go that extreme. Because we need to have that which the world will look to us for. Because right now, what we are having is such that we really don't know how much of a joke we look like.
We are.
To the world. Like I was watching a video about China the other day. I'm like, these Chinese people that we are saying that all these Chinese people, I'm like, I think you need to go to China first before you disrespect them.
Yes, there's an intentionality to growing their people that now they grow the nation.
And this guy, what's his name? Steve, the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook. Yeah. Tim Cook said something that he said that the reason we manufacture in China is not because of the intellectual
abilities of their people.
It's because of the tooling. That if you ask for a particular skill set
in the world,
that China will bring you a football field of that particular skill set.
Just one.
Not based on certificates.
But their technical know-how.
Technical know-how. They've built so much competence that the world has to depend on them if you really want to make that thing and you want to make it fast. You know, and he said if you come to America, you will not be able to find enough to fill in a room. So he was trying to explain it, and I said that's why this national aspiration you spoke about
is really important.
It's really important because as you were just speaking, I'm like,
it's interesting. Somebody who is very similar to the person you just spoke about is also someone called Benjamin Carver. Yeah. My pastor used to talk about him a lot. You know, the man who discovered, I think, about 300 different products from peanuts.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's very interesting to see how just one discovery can open a lot of facets in the society. And I mean, look at how many things being produced from peanut even today. So many variations. I mean, it's really important that I think that our economic or socio-economic development as a people is very much connected to education. And once we can get it right in education, every other thing will fall in.
Yeah, and I think, to be sincere, see, Larry, but so far so good. I think when it comes to education, we really need a wake-up call. But then again, when you look at the way technology is, and the what do you call the interventions that you've been running with DigiLearns, with AREAi, do you see us covering ground with more governmental support?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, for us focusing on last mile users, you know, those in rural communities, those in marginalized settings, if we get, so I'll use an example. Our fast track program, the one that supports, you know, foundational skills development with the Mavis Talking Books and Pen, when we were doing it as an organization, as at a time before we had governmental partnership, we'd reached, let's say, 2,000 plus 5,000, 7,000. When the government came in, the number jumped to 8,000 plus 25,000.
Wow.
And that is what governmental cooperation allows you to achieve, right? The government will not have all of the answers, 100%, right? They can provide a structure, and you can have, and that is where the private-public partnership, PPP, comes in. When you talk of private sector partners, sometimes it doesn't necessarily translate to the PWCs they'll handle, the Access Bank, or those in banking, transport, telecommunications. No, the non-profit or the civil society organizations also account for that private sector partners. So if we can have those synergy, we can bring in the technical know-how because we work on the field. There's that practical understanding of contextual realities that the government just, applies, its own political will to escalate and scale. Now, we are at a point in AREAi where we believe that the answer to scaling for all of our intervention is governmental adoption. That is how we build now. So I tell my team, we need to build interventions and initiatives that when it is time to take it to 10 million people, the government can do so. Organizations' programs can and should respect three things: scalability, replicability, and sustainability. If those three things are taken into account in the design and deployment, scaling will not be a problem. But scaling as an entity, as an institution, might be problematic because there are places you would not have jurisdiction. That because there is a democratic system in place, which is government of, by, and for the people, it allows you to take that solution, that intervention to the people. And that's where the government comes in. So while you design for the people, I tell my people, we design for the government as well, because it makes it easier. Now, with that, with just one governmental partnership that we have, in a pilot implementation phase, we at AREAi, we have seen what it means and how we can take a solution from just 10 people to millions of people if it works. That's another thing. I mean, I function in an era because I also believe so much in the power of evidence and research that there's a lot of interventions that cannot be scaled. And that's because they do not work. So in the global education agenda, which I'm very much familiar with, is what people are prioritizing and governments are taking in hook and sinker is what works. And a huge example is something called the teaching at the right level methodology in India. It was started by a foundation called Pratham Foundation. They showed that it worked, and the Indian government deploys these in almost 28 states. Is what has led to something called the Annual State of Education Report in India today. It's become a governmental policy away from an organizational initiative. And that's what happens when you build something that works. The government takes it and make it scale across all of, where their power reaches. And I think here, it's everywhere.
I mean, I think building AREAi and DigiLearns in Nigeria, in Africa, has been challenging, obviously.
Of course, it has been.
What has kept you going, really?
I think it's having that very in-depth understanding of what service means, right? Serving people and following in the path of self-actualization. What makes you happy? And how you should go about it. Some of the challenges that we've faced are things that are, very surmountable, and it takes that, deployment of resilience to be able to overcome them. And I think seeing joy, fulfillment, happiness, in the fields of, all of the people that we've worked with has really also helped in staying the ground. And I'll give you an example. There's an IDP camp where we went to, and one of the beneficiaries, because as an academic, I wanted to mention the name before.
That's fine.
Let me say A.
Yes.
16 years old, adolescent who has never been to school, can speak English, already a mother of 3. At 16, bro, right? This is life and direct. You understand? There's no sugarcoating, right? We work in rural communities, ITP camps, and on the first day, when we were doing community consultation, trying to mobilize, she was part of the first set of people who showed up. When we were explaining, this is what we provide, we support you to build foundational skills of literacy and numeracy, not necessarily for formal school enrollment, but even for self-reliance. Because she was already mentioning, the parent who brought her, was saying she wants to start business of Fura de Nunu, but they used to cheat her. That is how lack of arithmetic capacities also informs.
So that means people already know these things. They know what they need.
Yeah, exactly, they do. And it shocks you, or it was shocking to us, and it will shock you, that we deployed our intervention. And after 6 months of working in this vicinity, can read and write and do basic math, right? And it was interesting because we also provide seed grant for our small business that she's starting. Now, we did a review, I think about 2 months ago. We just went back to the community, and we could see the improvement on ourselves and on our children as well. And that is what sometimes brings about that desire to say, the going might get tough, but if you think about those wounds, life sustenance and life expectancy, funnily, which is even long-term, how they will live long to serve themselves and their family is dependent on your desire to stay steadfast to your path, then you will not think twice, right? Represent the ambition of thousands of children or even millions that AREAi is yet to reach. And if we give up because we are facing a challenge or 2 or even 3 or 10 challenges, then that means that there are millions of children who will not have the same opportunity that he has, right, or had, right, which is really important in this life. A may have a child who would turn to the path of violence because he is not supported to build skills. And that child could be on 3rd Mainland Bridge one day, knocking my dad's window. The understanding of the connections between, or the nexus between our actions and inactions is what keeps us going sometimes. If we want to break the cycle of violence, of crime, of interdependence, then it's important that we stay very focused on this part of providing support to ensure that people can become the best, versions of themselves and live to their fullest potential. And that's what AREAi is really about.
That's very inspiring.
Thank you.
What has made you cry on this journey?
What had made me cry? I would remember we had gone to one state like that, and I think it's about the state of living that we met those people. And I was asking myself, why in the entire wide world would there be a set of people that government intervention has never come to them. But they tell you when it's election time, they know where to vote. But there's no water, there's no electricity supply, internet connection is a no. We wanted to make a call that day and I climbed a tree. There is interestingly a picture of me doing that. Interestingly, right? And I mean, by the time you look at all of these things, you feel, aren't these people, aren't they citizens of this nation? And why should they be subjected to this standard of living, right? And that crying over time turned to joy because we were able to do and provide our own support to see that they can also experience what it means to live. And that's something that is, to me, profound, right? To live and experience life as a citizen in this nation is something that we always need, regardless of, there are some people, they do not mind. All they want to do is wake up, right? Go to their place of work, get fed, come back home, and sleep in peace. If they can do all of that with access to basic essential services, they will be fine. And that's enough. That's enough for some people. Ordinary lives, but lived to the fullest potential. That is the least our government can do. And even when they are failing in that right, that's what we as organizations stand for, to complement and see how we can support these people to be the best versions of themselves.
But how do you find, coming to the close of this particular conversation, right?
Yep.
How do you find, or what's one belief you've held when you started this journey that has evolved over time?
One belief that has evolved over time.
Or what's something that you've held to be true that you found that you've had to change this time?
That would be something I love. People who have heard me talk about this somewhere would know I used to talk about, and that is that passion is never enough, right? And then my favorite line: passion is key, but capacity is king. You can, in this space, you can never underemphasize the significance of you knowing your onions. It's really important. You cannot navigate the intricacies of doing this work by just being a passionate professional. There are some doors you will knock and passion will fail you, right? It is that sacrosanct understanding of the ropes that will open those doors. We've closed some, to use your terminology, deals in our own term, partnerships. That it's as a function of how cerebral and grounded they perceive us to be, right? So I always tell my people in my team, we subject ourselves to this continuous team and organizational development. And it's very interesting because your organizational effectiveness in that space is equated to your individual brilliance. So if you have a team of 10 people, those 10 individuals must be exceptional in their own portfolios and their capacities. That is what makes your organization shine and stands out as an organization. So I think sometimes, when I was growing, what changed was I always believe, you just need one person who understands how it works, the other person should follow. No, right? Everybody needs to bring their aim game, exactly. And that's one thing that's really helped us, AREAi stand tall, amidst contemporaries.
Wow, Larry, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been an exciting talk.
If I wanted to take this conversation, I would have gone 3 hours.
I know, right?
I know. I can take this conversation 3 hours.
Absolutely. If there's a version 2.0, let's do it.
I'm not even done.
I know, right? I know.
I'm not even done.
We should do a 2.0.
I think we should because. I think I have unfinished questions, but let's just end it here today.
No worries at all.
Because I don't even want to go in there.
Okay.
I don't want to go
Thank you very much.
I know
it's been a very fantastic one
but thank
as well.
you so much for making it here today.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for giving us of your time.
Absolutely.
Because I really see the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy we've been able to sit down and
share some insights
and just rub the surface because there's so much.
Yes, there's so much.
There's so much to unearth, and I'm really glad that you made it here today.
Thank you.
So guys, thank you for watching on this episode.
Thank you so much.
Please like, subscribe, share. Like I promised you at the beginning, it's going to be exceptional. And you can follow his social media handles, the work that he does is going to be in the comment section and in the tagline under, you will see it there. please ensure to follow him and follow the work that he's doing,
Thank you.
and also follow this channel, for more conversations like this, because the more you like, the more you share, the more people we could bring to come on this channel. So thank you guys for watching, and do have a great week.